This week, we had our president giving an update on how the State of the Union is. And you could have guessed it, the economy is in the toilet, the price of eggs are at an all-time high, and the average family has a heart attack whenever they enter the grocery store. That's the real State of the Union. You're watching the Demetrios Araujo Show, and I'm your host, Demetrios Araujo. Without further ado, let's begin.
I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast, I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.
The State of the Union speech is when the president goes in front of Congress and tells them how the country is doing from his view. Of course, it's stupid, and we should do away with it, simply because everybody already knows, especially when Nancy and her husband, who have both been heavily invested in the stock market, sees how much money they're losing. This speech was filled with lie after lie, so let's take it from the top. Starting with the first lie that Joe Biden said, it was the Inflation Reduction Act and healthcare costs. Biden touted the $740 billion spending bill Democrats dubbed as the Inflation Reduction Act, claiming that during his State of the Union address Tuesday night that the new law will decrease healthcare costs. Quote, with the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring your healthcare costs down, so you can sleep better at night, the president said. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any other major country on earth. Biden said big pharmaceutical countries could no longer make record profits by hiking up prices. Quote, this law also caps out-of-pocket drugs costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 per year, when there are, in fact, many drugs like expensive cancer drugs that can cost up to $10,000 to $12,000 to $14,000 per year. Biden said, if drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies will have to pay Medicare back for the difference. Biden later added, now some members are threatening to appeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Make no mistake, if you do anything to rise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it. So, this is the quote that the White House is saying that he said, but in actuality, he said this.
Make no mistake, if you try anything to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it.
Yes, that sounds nothing like, I will lower the cost of prescription drugs. No, he did not say any of that. He said, blah, 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 blah. That's what he said. But of course, the White House is going to come out with a transcript of what he was supposed to say. I'm pleased to say, and this is going on with what Biden said, I'm pleased to say that more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. Yes, because if you don't, then you will get charged. That's the reason. If I don't, in my state that I live in, have health insurance, then I will be charged a yearly fee, just like car insurance. At record, 16 million people are enrolled under the Affordable Care Act. Thanks to a law I signed last year, millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. However, the president left out potential increases that could result from this legislation. The so-called Inflation Reduction Act will most likely increase taxpayer costs by $248 billion over the next decade and contribute to higher insurance policies, all at your expense through more Obamacare subsidies. The bill ensured the federal government could negotiate drug prices. However, that bill did not reduce the real costs associated with producing medicine, likely to be passed on to consumers. Also, extending Obamacare subsidies will likely have little effect on the premiums that insurers pay. Extreme abortion bans. This is his second thing that Joe Biden talked about. Biden painted life-saving legislation restricting abortion as extreme. During his State of the Union remarks on Tuesday, Congress, he says, and I quote, Congress must restore the right the Supreme Court took away last year and codify Roe v. Wade to protect every woman's constitutional right to choose. Biden said, the vice president and I are doing everything we can to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient privacy, I should say. So the thing is, we're going to stop him right there. You cannot choose to kill somebody or not to kill somebody. You are not God. Because you chose to have sex with somebody, because 99.99999% of abortions come from consensual sex. If you chose and when you chose, because 99, like I just said, 99% of abortions come from consensual sex. When you chose to have sex a week after or a month after, you cannot choose to get rid of that result of doing sex. You cannot choose to get rid of what you just did. You had sex. The process of which we have sex is to result in a baby. You cannot change that. That's Mother Nature. Now, to sit here and play God and say, do I really want this baby to survive? Do I really not want this baby to survive? Is it going to cause a burden to me? No. You caused a burden to that baby by having sex when you were not ready. When you did not have a father and a mother that was committed to that relationship, you did not have the proper family built before having that baby. So that's your fault. Now you will deal with the repercussions of your own actions. Moving on, but already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. No, there's no such thing as an extreme abortion ban because of the fact that you yourself chose to have that baby. You cannot now say that you do not want that baby anymore. That does not make any sense. Make no mistake, if Congress passes a national abortion ban, I will veto it. The president's reference to quote, extreme abortion bans refers to laws that protect unborn babies from being killed. Almost 70% of Americans support limiting abortions to the first 3 months of pregnancy, according to a January 2023 survey by Knights of Columbus and Marist poll. About 14 states have passed the near total abortion bans on aborting unborn babies. According to a Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, and 6 more states have passed near total abortion bans dependent on legal action. One state, Florida, bans abortions after 15 weeks. 26 states have few or no laws restricting abortion. Analysis by Catherine Loiser Institute shows that the overwhelming majority of European nations restrict abortions to 15 weeks, making the United States laws allowing late-term abortions some of the most extreme in the world. No, European nations allow elective abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, as is effective, permitted in several United States, and America is one of the only a small handful of nations, along with China and North Korea, to permit any sort of late-term elective abortion, said Alingla B. Nugent, a Loiser Institute associate scholar. The states with strong pro-life laws on the books allow timely medical treatments for miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, and other medical procedures needed to save the life of a pregnant woman. Contrary to the claims of many high-profile Democrats. Number 3, border success. We now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers and seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in the last several months alone. United States Customs and Border Protection reports that it seized just over 14,000 pounds of fentanyl in fiscal year 2022, which ended September 30th, and more than 7,000 pounds between October and the end of December. In February, CBP reported a large drug seizure in San Diego sector, including blue pills that contain fentanyl, with a total weight of 250 pounds, with an estimated street value of $3,412,000. Under President Donald Trump's in fiscal year 2018, Customs and Border Protection reported seizing 2,135 pounds of fentanyl, and in 2020, it seized nearly 5,000 pounds of the lethal drug. Most fentanyl today is manufactured in Mexico and brought across our southern border. Laura Reese, director of the Heritage Foundation Border Security and Immigration Center, and Virginia Krieger, president of Lost Voices of Fentanyl, recently wrote, "So the Signal is a heritage multimedia news organization." Quote, "But the Biden administration and the left remain fully committed to their open border policies, even though opioids, largely fentanyl, are now the number 1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 45 years old," Krieger and Reese wrote. The increase in the amount of fentanyl flooding into America is accompanied by a record number of illegal immigrants crossing the southern border. Fiscal year 2022 saw 2.76 million illegal immigrant border crossings. Ron Viglio, former director of the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, told the Daily Signal on Monday that agents are overwhelmed by the border crisis. Valido said that there is a mental health crisis among Border Patrol agents because the stress and frustration caused by the Biden administration's self-inflicted crisis at the southern border. The response to the border crisis, Biden outlined a plan in January to limit the number of illegal immigrants crossing into America. The plan aims at limiting unlawful migrants from Cuba, Nigeria, Haiti, and Venezuela to 30,000 per month. Since we launched our new border plan last month, unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nigeria, and Venezuela has to come down by 97%, Biden said during his speech on Tuesday night. With a record number of encounters at the border and fentanyl flowing across, Tom Homan, former acting director of the United States Immigration Customs Enforcement and a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, said in a recent statement, quote, Congress needs to hold Joe Biden, Homeland Security, Algerno, Marcos, and everybody else responsible for this travesty accountable for what they have done to the nation. The administration's policies are dangerous and inhumane, and the majority of Congress better get serious about doing something to stop them. We are quickly running out of time to fix this. Act now, show some spine, and demonstrate that you care about border security to some extent, the left does. Number 4, greatest threat to democracy since Civil War. Biden celebrated how far the country has come since the COVID-19 pandemic-induced recession, but he also referred to the January 6th Capitol riot, repeating his claim that it was one of the greatest threat to American democracy since the Civil War. Okay, so if you think that January 6th was the greatest threat to American history since the Civil War, Joe Biden, what do you think about February 6th? February 6th in Oklahoma, transgender protesters broke into the Capitol in Oklahoma. And are we going to talk about that? No, we're not going to talk about that because those people agreed with you. The only reason why you do not like January 6th is because of the fact that January 6th protesters agreed with something you strongly disagree with. I do not think that anybody should jump into the Capitol building of the United States of America. And I also do not agree with anybody jumping into the Capitol building of any individual state, any individual city, or any individual country at all. If you break into the Capitol building of the United States of America, or Oklahoma, or Florida, or Massachusetts, or Nebraska, or wherever the hell you want to say, if you break into the Capitol building of that state, city, or country as a whole, if you break into those Capitol buildings, you need to be held responsible for trespassing. If you're trespassing into Nancy Pelosi's office like the Horn Man did on January 6th, yes, you will be held accountable. But if you also break into the Capitol building in Oklahoma City, in Oklahoma, you will be held accountable. It's the same exact thing. If these protesters in January 6th are going to be held accountable for breaking into the Capitol building on January 6th, 2020, or 2021 rather, January 6th, 2021, why are we not going to hold these people, these transgenders accountable for breaking into the Capitol building on February 6th, the very next month? Literally only 2 years after. What's the difference? The only difference is that they have a different political view than you. That's the only difference this administration is forgetting about. Now, of course, they're not going to mention this. He noted that his second State of the Union address comes 2 years after the riot. And 2 years ago, our democracy faced its greatest threat since the Civil War, Biden said. Today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken. Okay, so to Democrats, democracy just means liberalism. If liberalism loses, democracy has lost its touch. If the Democrats lose an election, they will say that the system that they have, quote unquote, democracy, is under attack. Their democracy is under attack, yes, because these liberals put so much effort into building their process, their politics from the ground up, that if a person that is not liberal goes into the establishment, then they will completely ruin the house of cards that they have built up for themselves. And they realize this. That's why they say the democracy is under attack. No, democracy to liberals is only liberalism. That's it. But democracy to conservatives or Republicans is just democracy. That's literally what it is. If the people vote on something, that's democracy. If the people vote Trump in 2016, that's democracy. If people vote Ron DeSantis in 2024 or Donald Trump in 2020, then that's democracy. If you win or lose, if the people voted Joe Biden in and we saw the credit, even though that there's a lot of irregularities, that's what the people voted for. That's democracy. It's not clear what he meant in comparing the Capitol riot, in which 950 Donald Trump supporters were charged with crimes, to a war in which several slave-holding southern states attempted to form a new Confederate States of America, raised their own military in an armed rebellion that wore on for 4 years and took the lives of more than 600,000 troops. During the Capitol riot, hundreds of Trump supporters breached the United States Capitol to prevent Congress from certifying Biden's Electoral College victory over Trump. Several were violent toward police officers and shouted threats at members of Congress and Vice President Mike Pence. Others caused property damage. Some rioters carried Confederate battle flags into the Capitol on January 6. None of the 950 people arrested were charged with an insurrection or attempting to violently overthrow the government. But federal prosecutors did charge 50 with conspiracy. Out of those, 4 were convicted of insidious conspiracy. The others were charged with conspiracy to obstruct a congressional proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct law enforcement during a civil disorder, or conspiracy to injure an officer. Biden didn't explain why this riot supposedly represented a larger threat to democracy than when Japan attacked the United States on December 7, 1941, which pulled the United States into World War II in opposition to the Axis powers. Further, the Capitol was attacked at least 4 times before January 6, 2021, 3 of those times after the Civil War. In 1814, British soldiers burned the Capitol during the War of 1812. It took about 5 years to rebuild the House chamber. In 1954, 4 Puerto Rican terrorists, I'm not going to name them, attacked the Capitol. Unlike those who got inside the Capitol building in 2021, these terrorists were armed with guns. The 4 opened fire on the House gallery, wounding 5 lawmakers. In 1971, a domestic terrorist group called the Weather Underground bombed the Capitol, causing $300,000 worth of damage. No one was harmed. Then the so-called Weathermen returned in 1983 and set off another bomb that tore through the second floor of the Capitol's north wing. According to the Senate's history site, no fatalities occurred in this case either. During the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, several rioters were carrying pepper spray or bear spray and wielding flagpoles as clubs and attacking law enforcement officers. 2 people died directly from the violence on January 6, 2021. One of them is Ashley Babbitt from the police brutality, but as many as 7 officers died indirectly from the events of the day, based on the tally of deaths published by the New York Times. So just because you have a heart attack after the event does not mean you died from that event. Number 5, police reform. This is what Joe Biden said in his State of the Union. Biden introduced the parents of Tyre Nichols, which is a political tactic that he wants to use to get reelected. The 29-year-old man who was fatally beaten by Memphis police officers as he was called for police reform Tuesday night during the State of the Union address. Biden left out the fact that Senate Democrats blocked a police reform bill in 2020. There are no words to describe the heartbreak and grief of losing a child, Biden said. But imagine what it's like to lose a child at the hands of the law. Biden went on to quote Nichols' mother, Christensen, "With faith in God, she said her son was a beautiful soul and something good will come from this." Biden called for Congress to, quote, "give law enforcement the training they need and hold them to higher standards" in a police reform bill. Quote, let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyre's mother come true. Something good must come from this, Biden later said. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts we need to do. Let's come together and finish the job on police reform. Okay, we tried to introduce a police reform bill in 2020, like they just said. And again, I talked about a rep that introduced a bill to hold police officers accountable a couple weeks ago. So why are we not siding with these people that introduce bills that agree with you? But no, of course, you want to talk, but now you know that the Democrats do not actually want police reform. They just want to talk. They don't want to do anything that actually solves the problem. In 2020, after the killing of George Floyd in Minnesota by police officers, proposed a police reform bill that would create a national policing commission to review the criminal justice system, collect data on use of force by police officers, and ban the use of chokeholds by federal officers, and withhold funds from state and local law enforcement agencies that don't ban chokeholds. Scott's bill will also withhold federal money from police departments that fail to report no-knock warrants to the Justice Department. However, Senate Democrats, then in the minority, blocked Scott's legislation from coming to a vote. Then Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, said the bill from Scott, who is black, was a token, half-hearted approach. Senate Republicans offered to allow floor votes on as many amendments as Democrats wanted. However, during negotiations, Scott said the Democrats said, we are not here to talk about that, and walked out. Number 6, schools and COVID-19. Biden opened his address with, quote, 2 years ago, COVID had shut down our businesses, closed our schools, and robbed us of so much. Today, COVID no longer controls our lives. Now, when Joe Biden says COVID destroyed our lives and shut down our restaurants and shut down our schools and blah, 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 no, you and the Democrats did. That's exactly who did it. While Biden now celebrates victory over COVID-19, in the ending of the pandemic, school closures and his appointees in poor leadership kept classrooms closed far longer than necessary, if at all necessary. The president claimed in 2021 interview with CBS Evening News that closed schools were a national emergency, but his solution only included well-ventilated rooms and classrooms with very few students. While Biden's team promised to have the majority of schools, so more than 50% open by day 100 of his presidency, the administration later walked the definition of, quote, open back to include classrooms only open to 1 day a week, hybrid virtual options, and testing proter sites. His appointees feared much worse. Biden's appointee for Deputy Secretary of Education fought to keep the San Francisco Unified School District locked down as superintendent. She refused to set a timeline for any schools to reopen. Rachel Walensky, Biden's pick to head the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, collaborated behind closed doors with the American Federation of Teachers to change the CDC's recommendation for school reopenings and other COVID-19 guidelines. Unions across the country would vote to keep classrooms virtual well into 2022. Additionally, progressive groups like teachers' unions and liberal media outlets consistently belittled those who desired for schools to reopen, accusing parents and students of racism, bigotry, and murder. The then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo suggested children who went back to school might, quote, kill grandma. Chicago Public Schools Teachers Union accused the desire to reopen schools as rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. Republican governors and parents' rights activists fought on the other hand to reopen schools and keep them open. President Donald Trump came under considerable fire for suggesting governors seriously consider reopening schools in April 2020. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, announced recommendations to reopen Florida's entire education system at full capacity in June 2020. He later slammed Biden over the sluggish national pace of school reopenings in 2021 as a pathetic failure of leadership, which I agree with. Along with DeSantis, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, signed executive orders to forbid schools from enforcing mask mandates, actions that Biden's Department of Education openly condemned. Now, when I was in school, I was forced to wear a mask, and during an assembly, they would literally point out the people that did not have their mask on. Oh, Dimitri, you got to put your mask on. Oh, Bob over there, you got to put your mask on. You need to pull up your mask now. And they will tell you this in front of the whole entire school. On the first day of school, they started doing this. Now, I don't want to tell you what thoughts were going through my head, but I completely did not comply at all. I just pulled it down some more. You're going to tell me to put up my mask? No, I'm going to pull it down. First of all, I need to breathe. Corey D'Angelis, a senior fellow at the American Federation of Children, told the Daily Signal Biden should rename himself the gaslighter in chief. Teachers' unions who own Democratic politicians held children's education hostage to secure multiple multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from taxpayers, and it worked for them. The federal government allocated about $190 billion in so-called COVID relief to K-12 schools since March 2020. The push to keep schools closed was always about politics and power, than safety and the needs of children. Parents aren't dumb. They'll never forget how teachers' unions hurt their children by fighting to keep schools closed for so long. Biden may claim that he fought to reopen schools, but does so omitting the timeline and manner in which he advocated. Biden was well over a year behind Republicans in reopening schools, while appointing staff who directly opposed and obstructed the process of putting students back into classrooms. 7. Inflation. Inflation has been a global problem because of the pandemic that disrupted supply chains in Putin's war that disrupted energy and food supplies, Biden said, referencing the Russian President Vladimir Putin's February 24 invasion of Ukraine. Although it's true that inflation has hit other nations' economies, it did not start in the United States in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, nor did it begin during Russia's war in Ukraine. The president's description of the inflation problem is misleading at best. When Biden was sworn into office on January 20th, 2021, inflation stood at 1.4%. As it began to rise in 2021, Biden called high inflation a transitory issue. By June the next year, inflation hit 9.1, a 40-year high. The rate of inflation increase has slowed, but it remains a significant problem that is eroding the savings of Americans. While the rate of price increases has certainly slowed in recent months, as government deficit spending also slowed and the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates, prices are up to about 14% under Biden, wrote A.J. Anthony, an economics expert at the Heritage Foundation. That is substantially more than the increase in average earnings. In fact, as Antony also wrote in November, the average American family lost over $7,000 because of inflation under Biden. The Inflation Reduction Act, signed by Biden in 2022, has done little to reduce inflation. In fact, it mostly added the government spending. It likely added to the government spending. So I completely agree with this. I completely agree fully that I completely agree with this article fully. I think that Joe Biden lied he fully knew that he was lying during this State of the Union, and he knew that he was using the Tyree Nichols parents as a political pawn, or two parents. He was using both parents as political pawns to get reelected. He fully knew this, and he does not actually want change. He does not actually want to fix anything. He just wants to sit there and act like the White House plant, the one that he is. So, with that being said, we're going to be moving on to a dozen takes.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love.
According to CNN, some rescuers reported days after quake rocked parts of Syria and Turkey, but death toll is steadily climbing. More than 21,000 people have died in Turkey and Syria after earthquakes swept through the region Monday. Rescue workers are now racing against time to pull survivors from the rumble of collapsed buildings in freezing winter conditions. At least 78,124 people were injured across both countries, according to authorities. The 7.8 magnitude quake struck 23 kilometers, 14.2 miles east of Nurdurguri in Turkey's Gulzanur. Oh my god, I can't even pronounce any of these states. In Turkey, at the depth of 14.9 miles. The United States Geological Survey, USGS, said the natural disaster in one of the deadliest earthquakes in 2 decades. Here are some of the latest developments. Survivors are still being rescued days later in Turkey. A mother and her 6-year-old daughter were rescued from a collapsed house in the Turkish city of in the Turkish city. Thursday, 68 hours after the massive tremor, German aid organization FIRE, working alongside British aid organization SAR Aid, said that the mother and the child were located in the rubble of the collapsed building around 5 a.m. local time on Wednesday. A family of 3, including 2 brothers and their mother, were rescued in the 78th hour in the Kurmanurmaz province. And in Herde province, a 10-year-old girl was found alive in the 90th hour after the earthquake. The first thing she asked after her rescue was milk, officials said in the statement. However, Syria Civil Defense, known as the White Helmets, warned that the hope of finding survivors is now fading inside Syria. Nations around the world working to get aid to Syria. France on Thursday pledged to give 12 million euros, $12.92 million to Syrians impacted by the quake. On the foreign ministry said the aid. I can't talk today. The aid will be channeled through the United Nations and the non-governmental organizations working directly with affected populations and in all of the areas struck by the earthquake, it said. Many Western nations have refused to send aid directly to the Syrian regime, which is under sanctions. The United Kingdom pledged an additional £3 million, $3,640,000 in funding to the White Helmets to support rescue and emergency relief operations in northwest Syria. Britain has so far given £3.8 million, $4.62 million to the White Helmets, a volunteer organization of humanitarian responders. The United States will provide $85 million for humanitarian assistance in Turkey and Syria. United Nations working to open more pathways to deliver aid to Syria. A United Nations aid convoy crossed from Turkey into northwestern Syria on Thursday for the first time since the earthquake hit. The 6 trucks carrying shelter items and non-food items drove through the Bab el-Haywa border crossing, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that he is open to the idea of delivering aid via additional border crossings, other than the Bab al-Haywa, which is the only humanitarian aid corridor approved by the United Nations between Turkey and the rebel-held areas of northern Syria. How can you help? Donate to victims of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria here. February's earthquake is already one of the deadliest in the past 20 years. Only 3% of the earthquakes and tsunamis across the world have resulted in more than 1,000 deaths, with 20,000 people perished in counting. The earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria this February is among the deadliest in recent history. Global ranking of the deadliest earthquakes since 2002. So, the one that affected the most amount of people is in China, and that was an 8 magnitude earthquake. So it injured 366,000 people. But the one that killed the most is in Haiti in 2010. A 7 magnitude earthquake killed 222,570 people and injured 300,000 people, and it caused $11 billion in damage. But if you go over to Japan, a 9 magnitude earthquake killed 19,846 people and injured 5,933 people. It caused $273 billion of damage. This is just crazy. And of course, the Turkey one, it caused 20,450 deaths so far and 75,600 injuries. Homeless is unknown and damages are unknown at this time. Yeah, so it's just a sad thing that is happening in Turkey. I wish that we had the technology to actually prevent the earthquakes from happening in the very first place, but of course, this is a fallen world and we cannot actually control these things. Now, moving into the next article from CNN, we have Republicans' extreme reaction to Biden's big speech helps make his point. So just because Republicans were yelling at Joe Biden because he was falsely saying that they want to get rid of Social Security and Medicare, they're the ones that are bad now. Not Joe Biden for lying, first of all. You can lie to the people all you want, but if you yell at the person for lying, that's your fault now. No, that's not how this works. If you lie to the people and somebody corrects you, that's not their fault for lying or yelling at you. Moving with the article, Sarah Huckabee Sanders may have a point. America's new political choice really could be between normal or crazy. But after a wild week in Washington, it's fair to ask who is on each side of the line of Arkansas Governor Drew in her Republican response to President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. 2 days later, it seems Republicans triggered their own trap. The unspoken propose of Biden's theoretical delivery on Tuesday night in much of his presidency is to ask Americans who the real extremists are. And the GOP's behavior before, during, and after his big night appears to be offering the empathetic answer. To moderate voters at least, as Republicans tolerate election deniers and use their invested carry muscle on topics that aren't top of mind for most of Americans. Okay, so this is exactly what the Republicans like doing. They like giving stuff to the American people that are not on the top of their mind. No normal American is worrying about the hotel costs, the hidden hotel costs that Joe Biden was talking about, or the baggage fees that you go when you go on an airplane. That's not what most Americans are worried about. I'm not going to sleep at night worrying, oh my God, why would I have to pay $60 when I go on an airplane? Okay, if you cannot afford the $60 that you are going on the airplane and having to spend to bring your luggage, how about you just bring the carry-on? That's it. Bring a bigger carry-on, put all of your money, all of your clothes in there, the carry-on, and you don't have to bring on a checked luggage. You don't have to pay the $60 if you don't want to. Bring on the carry-on, and that's all you need. If you can't fit everything you need in the carry-on, then bring the checked luggage. That's why we have the option. It's not a mandatory $60 that you pay. If you want to bring that, then you can bring that. But if you don't have $60 to pay for the checked luggage, then why are you going on a vacation in the first place? Like, it just doesn't make much sense over here. Sanders spoke moments after the Georgia Republican rep Marjorie Taylor Greene was on her feet yelling "liar" at Biden, with the House chamber sounding more like a heckler-filled late night comedy club than a solemn state occasion. Okay, so nobody is looking at the State of the Union as a state occasion. It's not a state occasion. It's just one of the speeches that Joe Biden has had. Nobody's actually paying attention to the State of the Union. We know what the State of the Union already is, like I talked about at the very beginning of this. Inflation's at a 9.1%. Americans know that when they go into the grocery stores, they will have a heart attack. That's the State of the Union. It's very, very bad. But for Joe Biden, he's going to sit here and lie. We already know. The new House majority is also grappling with the destruction of serial fabulous George Santos, the New York congressman who was caught lying about his education, the job resume, and his family background. His fellow New York Republicans, fisherman Rep. Nick Loida told CNN on Wednesday, "Every time I have to come to something like this and talk about George Santos, I can't talk about what Republicans ought to do instead." Meanwhile, new Republicans led oversight hearings, including one on Wednesday, apparently desired. Meanwhile, the new Republican-led oversight hearings, including one on Wednesday, apparently designed to prove that some combination of Twitter, the FBI, and Biden stole the 2020 election, have further erased the line between conservative opinion TV and governance. Okay, just because you are a conservative does not mean that you believe every conspiracy that comes out of the conspiracy realm. I'm a conservative, but I don't agree with every single conspiracy that comes out. Don't group me with these conspiracy theories. The all-day session featured the kind of historic questioning and grandstanding which verged on bullying of the witnesses. So you're complaining about bullying? What grade are we in? Middle school? That delights the GOP's base and runs on a loop on right-wing media. But if anything, it undermined the promise that a massive media deep state swamp conspired against Trump, as witnesses testified that there is no order from the FBI to temporarily suppress the New York Post story about the laptop reportedly belonging to the Hunter Biden's son. Okay, so Hunter Biden's lawyer already came out and said, yes, in fact, that is Hunter Biden's laptop. So what do you mean apparently? It's already been settled. Where was I? Okay, another House hearing on Thursday, the first of a series into the alleged weaponization of the government against conservatives, will again fuel an impression of the GOP is trying to build scandals from right-wing talking points. While such showdowns allow party leaders to fire up virtual base voters and cook up a general stench of scandal that, even if unproven, could harm the Biden administration, they risk highlighting the GOP's most extreme media-hungry personalities in alienating moderate voters. Okay, so you're going to sit here and say that they're using propaganda to trick the voters into voting a certain way. This is CNN talking. CNN, how about you look into the mirror for once? Look into the mirror. You're saying that the Republicans use propaganda to trick the voters that don't think a certain way into voting a certain way. That's exactly what CNN is doing all day long. Through this article too. It's like the pot calling the kettle black. You're the one that is sitting here lying time after time after time after time. But you're going to say that somebody else is lying? No, you're the one lying, CNN. Moving on to the next article from MSNBC, talking about another liar over here. With the hearing on Twitter, Hunter Biden backfired on Republicans. No, it really didn't. We just pointed out what the president's son did behind closed doors, talking to models that he paid $500 here, $2,000 here, $1,000 here for nudes, for FaceTime, for all of these sexual acts. We were pointing out these things because the people should know what the president's son is doing. Imagine if Donald Trump Jr. did this, or anybody else in Trump's family did this. It's just disgusting, and it's an embarrassment of the Joe Biden family. Republicans and their allies had looked forward to Wednesday's House Oversight Committee's hearing for quite a while. At long last, GOP lawmakers would pull back on certain rascally Democrats conspirating with equally rascally Twitter employees to suppress stories about Hunter Biden's laptop, squelch conservative criticisms, and silence voices on the right. So they actually did do this. If you look at the Twitter files, we did cover the Twitter files. It was Republicans assumed going to be awesome. Even before the hearing began, the White House marveled not only at the odd timing of the Oversight Committee's gathering the day after the State of the Union, GOP lawmakers probably should have at least pretended to take an interest in the actual governing, but also at the subject matter. White House spokesperson Evan Sams said that the hearing would be a bizarre political stunt. Okay, so everything that a politician does is a political stunt. If a politician goes to a funeral, that's a political stunt. Whatever a politician does is for political gain, which means that it is a political stunt. So what are you talking about? What's your point being made? If anything, he understated matters. NBC News reported Wednesday on key elements on the hearing actually backfiring on the Republican who organized it. The House Republican hearing on Twitter's role in suppressing the Biden laptop story took some unexpected twists Wednesday, including one witness testifying that the White House had requested the platform remove a Chrissy Teigen tweet insulting then President Donald Trump. Remember, the whole point of the hearing was to explore the extent to which Democrats pressured Twitter to suppress content from conservatives. It was against the backdrop on Wednesday that Democrat Rep. Gary Conloy of Virginia asked Anilka Coiler, a former member of Twitter's content moderation team, about this September 2019 tweet from Teigen, a prominent model and television host criticizing Donald Trump. The White House almost immediately thereafter contacted Twitter to demand a tweet be taken down. Is that accurate? Colony said. I do remember hearing we'd received a request from the White House to make sure we elevated this tweet, and they wanted it to come down because it was a derogatory statement directed at the president. The tweet was not taken down, but the relevant detail was the revelation that the Republican White House tried to squelch criticism of the then president. What's more, this was not only the new detail to emerge Wednesday that undermined the point of the hearing in response to questioning from Democratic Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, of New York. Former Trump employees acknowledged that Trump published racist content that ran afoul of the company's standards and policies. So Twitter altered its standards and policies to accommodate the Republicans' offensive content. Okay, so you're going to sit here and say that Trump is the one being offensive. No, Joe Biden's the one being offensive by tweeting lies and lying to the American people time after time. But thank God for Elon Musk for fact-checking analysis on the president's tweet. If we had this when Trump was speaking, then we can see what he was saying, if it was false or if it was actually true. But we did not have this technology at the time. But you can see that every single time Joe Biden speaks, he always says, oh, inflation's at a record low. Oh, jobs are at a record low. And then Elon Musk's Twitter goes and fact checks him, and then he deletes the tweet. So what's the point being made here? Everybody lies. You're a politician. We expect you to lie. But the extent of which you lie is what really matters. And yes, of course, I don't agree with Trump trying to ban Chrissy Teigen, or erase the tweet at least. Chrissy Teigen's tweet. I don't like her anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. I think that she should just be outshined from society. I think she's a gross person, but, that's just me. The witness testified that Twitter could have done more to prevent the January 6th attack, but executives made a conscious decision not to. Okay, so January 6th. There was no preventing January 6th. People were just too heated. People were too misinformed to go to the Capitol. And people were just too extreme. Like, listen, going to the Capitol building and protesting is one thing. But if you go inside of the Capitol building, that's when you would just leave. Next, the Biden campaign did ask Twitter to remove a non-consensual nude photos of Hunter Biden from the platform, which Republican Rep. Brian Donalds of Florida found scandalous for reasons I do not understand. Okay, so because of the fact that I do not like nudes being in any platform, I would like that one to be removed. I like all nudes to be removed from every single platform, including Pornhub. That's besides the point, though. On Twitter, in this situation, firstly, we should censor those nude photos, first of all, and then we should release them, because that's the president's son. You need to be at a certain standard to have respect for the people that you're protecting and serving. You should have respect for the people that you're serving to not do something so gross and send nudes to a bunch of people and pay people for their sex as the president's son, or at the time, a senator's son. You should have respect for the people that you're serving. Hunter Biden, I'm talking to you. Have some respect for yourself. With that being said, that's going to be it for this episode of the Demetrios Araujo Show. If you did enjoy this episode, please leave a like down below or subscribe for weekly content. I do try to post every single day, but new episodes of the Demetrios Araujo Show is going to be uploaded every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So with that being said, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you all and have a great one. Hey, were you really going to click off this video before leaving a like and subscribing down below? Wow, so rude.